It's July 7, Ukraine Media Center starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko, and today we will be talking about the preparation to the Ukraine Recovery Conference, URC 2025, that is about to take place in Rome shortly. Media Center is prepared to it together with the rest of the country. So today we also will be talking about the development of pharmaceutical business in Ukraine and its impact on the EU market for critical medicines. And joining us in the studio are Maryna Slobodnichenko, Deputy Minister of Health for European Integration, thought leader of the URC Pharmaceutical Workshop. Good afternoon, Ms. Maryna. Good afternoon, Svetlana. So URC is going to take place on the 10th and 11th of July, and the matter of pharmaceutical market takes quite an important place there. So what are your expectations in terms of this conference? Well, let me start with the introduction and invitation. Well, I would like to invite to this pharmaceutical workshop all of the community that is curious about this topic. It's going to take place at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 10th of July in the fields of the conference for Ukrainian recovery. So everyone is in
актуальним для нас і що ми очікуємо від цієї конференції і саме від воркшопу. Напевно, треба заакцентувати увагу на трьох речах, на наших трьох очікуваннях основних. По-перше,
expectations. First of all, I would like to highlight it for the world, for the European community, that the European pharmaceutical sector is pretty weighty, and the state is playing a significant role in shaping a pharmaceutical segment and regulatory policy. Today in Ukraine, we implement quite a strict regulatory policy that is going to enjoy trust on part of the European community, the trust to the medicines manufactured in Ukraine, and basically to those regulations we're about to implement on our way of your integration. And by the year 2027, we are supposed to already have such a policy created. So what's the role of the pharmaceutical market in the recovery of the country? In which terms is it viewed? Well, look, for the time being, the pharmaceutical sector is the sector that is shaping the economy of the country, is the jobs, is the fraction of GDP when it comes to the manufacturing of medicines in Ukraine. And it's important to start talking about the localization of manufacturing facilities in Ukraine. We are quite an interesting country for investments in terms of pharmaceutical industry, for foreign partners, for cooperation, for establishment of strategic partnership with European manufacturers, EU manufacturers. And today we are to the European countries as they try to overcome their problem of deficit of the critical medicines in EU that arisen during the times of COVID, when the supplies of critical materials from India and China were disrupted, and the European Union started facing the problem of deficit of the critical medicines in Europe. So today we are ready to give a helping hand. Well, you've mentioned that the regulations are becoming more and more strict. There is some significant transformation going on in the market within the Euro integration processes. So what were the steps that Ukraine has already taken, and what are the expectations to the results of these transformations? Well, first of all, I would like to thank our deputies, our parliamentaries, those who have undertaken this political resolution. And starting from the 1st of January 2027, a law comes into force that will create a regulatory supervisory authority in Ukraine board that includes the European Commission, business ombudsman. So that will be the first step taken by the state that will help to the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And I think that, first of all, the patients, because all of our steps are human-oriented. Then we address the European Commission to support the establishment of such regulatory authority. The European Commission has allocated 1.5 million euro to build such a policy in Ukraine. Now that winning has already been announced, and by the end of August, we expect to see the end of the bid with a team of European experts who are going to work shoulder to shoulder with our public servants in Ukraine. Within the next year and a half. That was the second step. And the third step, it may sound a little bit creatively, but I'd like to say that it's about the union of three institutions: the authorities, the state, the business, and the public. In this policy of establishment of pharmaceutical policy, the establishment of policy of affordable medicines for the population, we are working hand in hand. There is no doubt that the state needs it and the public needs it, and I think that it's the right step to make. It's good communication, it's the joining of forces, and basically the Ukrainian Recovery Conference, the platform that will be dedicated to the pharmaceutical sector, to the pharmaceutical industry, is yet another evidence that we sound in unison. Well, now that you've announced the workshop, can you please tell us a little bit more about it? What are the goals? Who will be the participants? And what are the expectations from this discussion? Well, let's start with the participants. Parliament will be represented. The head of the Health of the Nation Committee, Mykhailo Radutskyi, the head of the subcommittee on Euro integration, Ms. Olga Stefanishina, who is in charge of Euro integration sector. That's in part of Ukraine. When it comes to European Commission, it will be represented by the director of Samte Directorate. That's our medical and health Directorate, Rainer Beckner. He's the part of our advisory board in Ukraine, and he will keep track of the transformation of the pharmaceutical reform, of the establishment of the supervisory authority. There will be also a representative of the Polish authority, which is in charge of authorization of the medicines in Polish market, Mr. Grzegorz Ceszak. Why Poland? Because they are already through their heading in the Council of Europe. They were in charge of development of the Act for the critical medicines. So basically, why this workshop has arisen? Because in the European Commission, they have already a legislation developed, a legislation about the critical medicines. It contains it's the draft legislation, and it contains all of the steps the European Union needs to take to overcome the problem with the deficit medicines. Also, the panel will be represented by the businesses, by the Ukrainian businesses, the Association of Medicines Manufacturers, Mr. Rada, and representatives of the European businesses, European for Medicines, and Adrian Verkhovna, their head. So basically, we've come up with a set of different views, and what do we expect is, first of all, to cover the capabilities of Ukraine. We really want to highlight our capabilities as a state in achievement of those results when it comes to the challenges required by the European Union. Also, within this workshop, we expect to start advocating the importance of establishment of strategic partnerships. And by the way, after the workshop, we are about to sign a memorandum between the business associations, the Ministry of Health, and it will be aimed at shaping of such strategic partnerships, and strategic partnerships are one of the ways to overcome the deficit of the critical medicine. And such strategic partnerships, the innovations that they may initiate in the pharmaceutical sector is what European Commission aims to invest in. So the second goal is to understand using which financial tools we may implement some innovations in Ukraine. How can we partner with our foreign partners, and what needs to be done by the state to do that. So basically, these days, thanks to the work of the Minister of Health, Viktor Leshko, we already have such tools as Europe for Health, and we have Horizon Europe, where the funds are being allocated for innovations and R&D, and there's yet another platform to understand how can we set up partnerships in this sector. So this memorandum about their strategic partnerships, is there any understanding how to move forward, with whom this partnership is already possible and where more work is needed? Well, I put a lot of expectations that the associations will play a significant role here, because the state may create a momentum, they may shape a policy, they may accentuate such events, but it's the businesses who are supposed to partner between each other. So we hope that this workshop and signing of memorandum will create the beginning of the path to the strategic partnerships. Are there foreign investments in Ukraine for the time being? Obviously so. Are there foreign investors manufacturing the medicines in Ukraine? Absolutely. But Ukraine needs to continue working on and on to create the conditions in which the strategic partnerships are going to feel comfortable working. Industrial parks, regulatory policy, and the trust to the state regulations. So the way is not very quick. This path is not very quick. Tomorrow we're not going to see the new manufacturing lines opening, but I would rather look at our capabilities and our state on a global scale. I would come from generic markets to innovative. So when the EU allocates funds for innovations, why don't we take advantage of this opportunity? The state may highlight it, and the businesses are supposed to understand how to implement it. Well, you've mentioned an ambitious goal to help the Europeans with critical medicines by manufacturing them in Ukraine. However, the European market is a pretty closed pharmaceutical market, so basically their manufacturing is localized in their countries and for their citizens. How can we really enter this European market and to manufacture, to sell the Ukrainian manufactured medicines in other European countries? Well, it's a cool question, and I have to mention a number of things here. Look, the first is that the European market is suffering from the deficit of critical medicines. So it's already opening. It's opening for the new opportunities, and it's looking for new partnerships. A year ago, they started testing the pharmaceutical facilities in Western Balkans and in Ukraine by ERA Medical Commission, and after that research, they are supposed to publish a report. I don't know whether it will be public or only for the uses by European Commission, but this marking of capabilities of Ukraine, such an evaluation has already taken place, and it's already an indicator that the Europeans are looking for the partnerships. Then, why are they starting to open up? Because the draft of the critical medicines law contains an article on strategic partnerships, and they consider neighboring countries. They don't go to China or India. They're looking at the neighboring countries for a reason. Those who have relevant capabilities, those who have relevant policies, and desire. So what else is needed? There is such a tool as mutual recognition of GMP certificates. GMP is a proper manufacturing practice. So this component is what's still missing a little bit. Ukraine is in the process of negotiations in the Euro integration line. Vice Prime Minister Olga Stefanishin announced the expansion of the agreement on relevance of the medicines, so the certificates could be recognized. The certificates of the manufacturing processes could be recognized by the European authorities. So that was the component that was missing, but we are working on it. We are proving that the level of quality control is sufficient, that we comply with all of the European requirements, and the certificates should be accepted. However, such recognition is not only needed by Ukraine, but also by the European manufacturers who are going to come to Ukraine to manufacture their medicines in Ukraine, and they will be able to undergo such proper practice recognition inspection. So it will be a mutual benefit. So the Critical Medicines Act will be expanded. So the critical partnerships, the European, the regulatory policy is what we need now. So, okay, why Ukraine? You say they're looking at neighboring countries. There is Poland, there are other countries. So what's so special about us that other countries don't have? Well, looking at things historically, after the split of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was one of the countries that had pretty well-developed pharmaceutical sector, and those historic roots, they are still effective today. This is what I take pride in the pharmaceutical industry. It's good that we don't stop in our development. More than 120 pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities are in Ukraine. I cannot say if they are all compliant with GMP standard, but at least 37 names out of the list of the critical medicines is manufactured by Ukraine in a closed cycle without procuring raw materials from India or China. We've made that analysis, and that's a pretty high indicator. The neighboring countries manufacture pretty much the same number of those critical medicines that the EU currently needs. It's a good indicator, but we may not stop there. We may talk about scaling of practices. So this is what we would like to achieve by the results of the ERC 2025. Thank you. Probably our journalists have any questions they would like to ask from our speakers. If not, then Ms. Maryna, I would like to thank you, and I hope that workshop is going to be really efficient and it will end with really good developments that will positively impact our pharmaceutical industry in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting this topic. Thank you. Let me remind you that we were talking about the preparations to the Ukrainian Recovery Conference that will take place on the 10th and 11th of July in Rome, and it will cover pharmaceutical sector. And Ukraine Media Center is working on the schedule for tomorrow and the days after. Stay tuned.